At the family reunion, Uncle Bob introduced me as, "My name is Julia. I'm 34 years old." Every summer, the Morales family reunion looked more like a financial bragfest than a gathering. New cars, new handbags, new stories of who made it. And this year, Uncle Bob had a microphone, literally. "Ladies and gentlemen," he shouted, tapping the mic. "Before we start the barbecue, let's celebrate our family's success stories." He went down the list. Cousin Mason, a lawyer, Cousin Clara, a tech CEO. Then he spotted me near the picnic tables. "And here's our very own Julia," he said with a smirk. "She's still finding herself." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Even my mother forced a polite smile. I just stood there, holding the potato salad I'd made, my hands trembling. Not from shame this time, but from restraint. Because what Uncle Bob didn't know was that I'd been waiting for this moment. And before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe and drop a comment. Where are you watching from? In the Morales family, affection came with a resume. That's not a joke. It's the simplest way I can explain it. Love was not free. Love was not a given. It was something you earned, and you earned it by being successful. Success had a very clear definition. It meant a good job title. It meant a big house. It meant a new car every 3 years. It meant your kids were in private school. If you had those things, you were given respect. You were given the best seat at the dinner table. Your opinion mattered. If you didn't, you were invisible. Or worse, you were a project. A problem to be fixed. I was always a problem to be fixed. Our family was split into 2 sides. My dad's side, the Morales side, ran businesses. They did things. They built things. They counted their money and were proud of it. My mom's side, the Santiagos, ran gossip. They were the audience. They talked about what the Morales side was doing. It was a perfect toxic system. The performers and the judges. Every gathering, every holiday, every simple Sunday dinner was a silent competition. It wasn't about catching up. It was about sizing each other up. The questions were always the same. "Mason, is that the new BMW? How's it handle?" "Clara, I heard your company got another round of funding. Congratulations." "Bill, your son made the varsity team?" "That's wonderful. My daughter just got accepted into the junior executive program." It was all small talk, but it felt like a battlefield. Everyone was smiling, but they were also counting. Counting square feet, counting vacation days, counting promotions. I was never good at that kind of math. The head of this whole system was Uncle Bob. He was my father's older brother, and he loved being the patriarch. He loved it even more after my dad passed away 5 years ago. My dad's passing was a tragedy for me. It was a power vacuum for Uncle Bob. I remember the funeral. It was a gray, cold day. I was numb. I couldn't stop crying, but I was crying silently into a wet tissue. Uncle Bob wasn't crying. He was organizing. He was directing the funeral home staff. He was shaking hands and accepting condolences like he was hosting a business mixer. He gave the eulogy. He stood up there in his best black suit and talked about my dad. But he didn't talk about my dad's laugh, or the way he loved fishing, or the silly songs he made up. He talked about how my dad successfully ran a hardware store for 30 years. He talked about how my dad was a pillar of the community. He talked about legacy and hard work. It sounded less like a goodbye and more like a transfer of power. When he finished, he stepped down, patted me on the head and said, "Don't you worry, Julia. I'll take care of things now." And he did. He appointed himself the moral compass and the financial advisor for everyone's life. His own company, Morales Insurance Group, was his proof of success. He built it from nothing, he always reminded us. He had a framed picture of his first dollar in his office. To Uncle Bob, money and goodness were the same thing. If you were rich, you were smart. You were a good person. You had drive. If you were poor or just normal, you were lazy. You were weak. You made bad choices. He saw the world in black and white. Winners and losers. And he needed someone to be the loser, so everyone else could see how good he was at winning. I apparently was his favorite cautionary tale. It started when I was in college. He sat me down at a Thanksgiving dinner. The table was full of turkey and pies, and all the cousins were talking about their majors. Mason was pre-law. Clara was in computer science. Uncle Bob turned to me. "Julia," he said, his voice loud enough for the whole table to hear. "What about you? Still doing that sociology thing?" "Yes, Uncle Bob. I'm thinking of getting my master's in social work." He laughed. It wasn't a mean laugh. It was worse. It was a pitying laugh, The kind you give a child who says they want to be a dinosaur when they grow up? Social work, he said, shaking his head. He took a sip of his wine. Julia, you can't eat good intentions. You can't buy a house with a good heart. He turned to my dad. Frank, you gotta talk to her. She's a smart girl. Don't let her waste it. She can come intern at my office. I'll teach her real-world skills. My dad just shrugged. He was caught in the middle. He loved me, but he respected his brother. She'll find her way, Bob, my dad mumbled. But Uncle Bob saw that as a failure. My failure. My dad's failure. From then on, I was the example. You kids work hard, he would say at Christmas, raising his glass. You study business. You study law. Or you end up like your cousin Julia, smart as a whip but no direction. She's got a good heart, he'd always add. That was the knife twist. Julia's got a good heart, but no direction. He said it so many times it became my official title in the family. I wasn't Julia, the graduate. I wasn't Julia, the daughter, or the sister. I was Julia, the one with no direction. It was humiliating. My aunts would pat my arm. Don't you worry, dear. You'll find a nice man. You'll settle down. They thought my direction was marriage. My uncles would try to give me tips. Julia, I know a guy hiring for a secretary. It's good pay. Good benefits. They didn't understand. They didn't even try to understand. The worst part, the part that truly hurt, was that no one ever asked what I actually did for work. They just heard the word nonprofit and their brains shut down. To them, nonprofit meant charity. It meant volunteering. They pictured me in a church basement handing out soup. They thought I was living on donations, barely scraping by. I tried to explain it once. Just once. It was a few years ago at another barbecue. I was sitting with my Aunt Lydia. So, Julia, she said, fanning herself with a paper plate. You still working at that center? It's an organization, Aunt Lydia. Horizon Impact Group. I'm a project manager. Oh, that's nice. You manage the volunteers? No, I manage our international partnerships. Right now, I'm working on a clean water initiative for 3 communities in South America. I handle the budgets, the logistics, the grant reporting. Her eyes glazed over. She was watching Cousin Mason show off his new watch. Budgets? That sounds complicated, she said, not listening. Oh, Mason? Is that a Rolex? My goodness. I stopped trying after that. I just let them believe what they wanted. I let them believe I was the quiet, simple, unsuccessful one. It was easier than fighting. My simple clothes confirmed their story. I didn't wear designer labels. I wore comfortable, practical things. My old car confirmed their story. It was a 10-year-old Honda, but it was paid off and it ran perfectly. To me, that was success. No debt. To them, it was poverty. It was failure. It was emotional neglect. That's the real name for it. They weren't hitting me. They weren't yelling at me. They were just erasing me. They looked at me, but they didn't see me. They saw a reflection of their own fears. The fear of being ordinary. The fear of not making it. I was their ghost of Christmas future. The one who chose good intentions over a good bonus. My whole life, I was the family's punching bag. But it was a quiet, polite kind of punching. It was all sighs and head shakes and pitying smiles. It was the good heart, no direction speech. So as I stood there at this reunion, holding a bowl of potato salad, I felt 20 years of this setup. All the dinners, all the holidays, all the quiet little comments. Uncle Bob, standing there with that microphone, wasn't just making a silly joke. He was summarizing my entire life with this family. He was putting the final stamp on my identity. And here's our very own Julia. She's still finding herself. The laughter from the crowd was the same laughter I'd heard my whole life. But this year was different. I was different. And I wasn't holding my breath, waiting for them to see me. I was just waiting for the right moment. By noon, the picnic table had turned into a stage. The smell of charcoal and burnt hot dogs was thick in the air. Kids were screaming and chasing each other by the lake. The adults had settled into the main event, talking about themselves. I was sitting at the edge of the table, next to the leftover potato salad. I was trying to be small. I was just eating a burger, listening to the buzz of their success. Cousin Mason, who was only 2 years older than me, was holding court. The partners at the firm are talking about making me junior partner by next year, Mason said, leaning back and stretching his arms. He wore a polo shirt with a tiny logo I knew cost more than my entire outfit. It's a lot of pressure, but, you know, someone's got to do the work. Oh, Mason, that's wonderful, Aunt Lydia cooed. She was my mother's sister, but she had married into the Morales mindset. We are so proud of you. Clara, my tech CEO cousin, just scrolled on her phone. My board just approved a new round of funding, she said, not even looking up. We're acquiring a smaller company in Austin. It's a total headache. She said, headache, but her voice was full of pride. It was a success headache. Those were the only problems you were allowed to have. I just kept eating. I knew my turn was coming. It always did. It was part of the show. Uncle Bob, holding a beer, walked over. He had a way of standing that made him seem bigger than he was, puffing out his chest. He was the ringmaster, and he had spotted an animal that wasn't performing. He smiled at me. It was that pitying smile. So, Julia, he said loudly. The conversation at the table dipped. People quieted down. They knew this part of the script. This was the entertainment. This was the part where they all got to feel a little bit better about their own lives. How are things, Uncle Bob? I asked politely. I kept my voice soft. Things are great. Things are great, he boomed, swatting the air. Business is up 10% this quarter, but I'm not worried about me. I'm worried about you. He pointed his beer bottle at my paper plate. Still working at that? That nonprofit? He asked. It was the same question as last year. And the year before. Yes, I said, looking at my food. Still there. He sighed, a big theatrical sigh. He looked around the table, making eye contact with the other adults. He was performing for them. Ah, Julia, always with the charity work, he said. He shook his head. Must be nice to live on good intentions. Must be nice to not have to worry about the real world. A few chuckles followed. My cousin Mason smirked into his cup. Some of us, Uncle Bob continued, gesturing to himself and Mason. We have bills to pay. We have to work in the real world. We have to make real money. Bob, be nice, my mother said. Her voice was weak. She didn't mean it. She was just playing her part, the part of the supportive sister-in-law. But she was embarrassed. She was embarrassed by me. I am being nice, Uncle Bob declared. I'm just saying, it's about time you got a real job. A real job. My job wasn't real. My 60-hour work weeks weren't real. The projects I managed, the people I helped, the budgets I balanced, none of it was real to him, because it didn't come with a corner office or a company car. I like my job, I said quietly. Of course you like it, he laughed. It's not work if they don't pay you anything. It's a hobby. More laughter. This time, even Aunt Lydia joined in. Oh, Bob, you're terrible, she said, giggling. It was the same script, every single year. For years, I dreaded this moment. For years, it made my stomach turn. It made my hands shake. It made me want to cry in the car on the way home. For years, I had tried to explain. I tried to say, I'm a project manager. I tried to say, I handle international grants. But they didn't want to hear it. Their version of me was more useful. Their version of me, Julia, the failure, the sweet, girl with no direction, made their own lives feel more successful. I was the dark background they used to make their own colors look brighter, so I stopped trying. I just sat there. I smiled politely. I took a bite of my burger. I let them laugh. I let them think they were right. I let them think they had won. I had learned a long time ago that you can't argue with people who have already decided who you are. You can't show your resume to people who refuse to read it. So I just sat there, in my old jeans and my simple t-shirt, and I let them have their fun. I was their entertainment. Well, Julia, Uncle Bob said, giving my shoulder a final hard pat. If you ever want to join the real world, I can always get you a job answering phones at my office. The offer is always on the table. Thank you, Uncle Bob, I said. I'll keep that in mind. He nodded, satisfied. He had done his part. He had reminded everyone of the family hierarchy. He was at the top. I was at the bottom. He walked away to go man the grill, his shoulders back, proud of himself. I took a deep breath. I looked down at my plate. My hands weren't shaking this time. I just felt calm. I knew as I sat there that this was the last time. This was the last time this scene would ever play. The script was about to end, and the new one was about to begin. I was clearing away paper plates, just trying to be useful, when the mood at the park changed. It happened all at once. The laughter and loud talking just faded. It was like someone had slowly turned down the volume on the whole reunion. I looked up. Everyone was staring at the small gravel parking lot. A sleek black SUV was pulling in. It wasn't a normal car. Not for this place. This was a park for minivans and old pickup trucks. This car was a mirror-shined, tinted-window luxury vehicle. It looked like it belonged in a motorcade, not at a public barbecue. It parked slowly, taking up a spot near the grass. For a second, nobody moved. The kids even stopped running. "Who is that?" Aunt Lydia whispered, clutching her purse. "Must be lost," Mason said, but he was staring, clearly impressed by the car. The driver's side door opened, and out stepped a navy blue pantsuit. A tall woman emerged, all sharp lines and quiet confidence. She had short, dark hair, simple pearl earrings, and a look on her face that said she was busy. She smoothed the front of her jacket and looked around the park, her eyes scanning the crowd. She looked completely out of place. She was a skyscraper in a field of bungalows. My heart didn't stop. It just paused. I knew that walk. I knew that posture. I knew that pantsuit. "Oh," I murmured, so quietly no one heard me. She actually came. It was Dr. Elaine Carrington, my boss, my mentor, the CEO of Horizon Impact Group, the woman who ran a $200 million international organization, the woman who advised senators, the woman who I had a 2-hour project debrief with earlier that morning. I had told her I had to leave early for a family reunion. She had laughed and said, "Family is important. Go. We'll finish this Monday." I never in a million years thought she would show up. Uncle Bob was the first to react. He saw an expensive car and a person in a suit. To him, that was a potential client. That was a networking opportunity. He dropped his grilling tongs and wiped his hands on his apron. He marched right over to her. His hand stuck out, that big President of Morales Insurance smile plastered on his face. "Welcome, welcome," he boomed, his voice echoing across the quiet park. "I'm Bob Morales, President of Morales Insurance Group. Are you lost, ma'am? Can I help you find something?" Dr. Carrington looked at his outstretched hand, and then at his apron, which said, "Grill Sergeant." She smiled politely. It was a small, professional smile. It was not a warm smile. "Not at all," she said. Her voice was calm and clear. It cut through the afternoon air. It wasn't loud like Uncle Bob's, but everyone heard it. "I'm here for one of my colleagues," she said. "I'm looking for Julia Morales." Every single head turned. Every single one. They all turned away from the fancy car, away from the impressive woman, and stared straight at me. I was standing there by the trash can, holding a pile of dirty paper plates. The silence was absolute. I could hear a bee buzzing by my ear. I saw their faces. I saw the confusion. I saw the disbelief. My mother's mouth was hanging open. Mason had frozen, his drink halfway to his lips. Uncle Bob, for the first time in his life, looked completely lost. His smile faltered. He slowly lowered his hand. He turned and looked at me, and then back at Dr. Carrington, and then back at me. The math was not adding up in his head. "Julia?" he echoed. His voice was a full octave higher. "You know, her." The her was so full of everything. It was full of no direction. It was full of answering phones. It was full of cautionary tale. Dr. Carrington laughed. It was a soft, genuine laugh this time. She had finally spotted me by the trash can. She walked right past Uncle Bob, leaving him standing there alone. She walked straight across the grass, her sensible heels not even sinking in. She walked right up to me. "Julia," she said, smiling warmly, "I am so sorry to interrupt your family time." I just stared at her. "Dr. Carrington," I said. "What are you doing here?" "I was driving back from my meeting," she said, "and I remembered you said you were here. I had some good news, and I decided, why wait until Monday?" She turned, addressing the stunned, silent crowd of my family. "We had a project debrief today," she explained to the open-mouthed group. But when she said she had a family reunion, I decided to come congratulate her in person. The air froze. Uncle Bob had walked back over, his face pale. "Congratulate her?" he echoed. "For what?" Dr. Carrington looked at Uncle Bob. She didn't know him. She just saw a confused man in an apron. She gave him a polite, professional smile. Then she looked back at me. She placed a hand on my shoulder. It was a simple gesture, but in front of my family, it felt like a coronation. Julia was just officially promoted last week, Dr. Carrington announced to the crowd. My mother's hand went to her chest. She's now the director of global initiatives for the entire Horizon Impact Group, Dr. Carrington said. The words just hung in the air. Director, global, initiatives. These were words my family understood. These were title words. These were success words. These words sounded like junior partner and tech CEO. Uncle Bob blinked. He was processing. Director? He said, his voice small. Director of what? That soup kitchen you work at? Dr. Carrington's smile tightened. Just a little. Horizon Impact is not a soup kitchen, she said, her voice still calm, but now with a sharp steel edge. We are an international nonprofit conglomerate. We run humanitarian, educational, and environmental programs across the globe. She turned her focus back to me, but she was speaking to them. Julia, she said, her voice full of genuine pride, oversees 22 of those outreach programs, across 4 continents. My Aunt Lydia, who had been bragging about her vacation home in Florida, made a small gasping sound. Julia's work, Dr. Carrington continued, is why we have programs in South America. Her strategic plan and her grant writing brought in over $10 million in donor partnerships last quarter alone. $10 million. My cousin Mason, the lawyer, choked on his drink. He actually coughed. My other cousin Clara, the CEO, lowered her phone. She was looking at me now. Really looking at me. For the first time in my life. She was seeing a competitor. Or an equal. I wasn't sure which. She directs operations, Dr. Carrington said. She handles million-dollar budgets. She manages teams of people on the ground. She is, to be blunt, the second highest-ranking person in the entire organization. I'm the CEO and she's my right hand. I am lucky to have her. The silence that followed was not like the silence before. This was not a waiting for the punchline silence. This was a world is just tilted silence. I didn't look at Uncle Bob. I didn't have to. I could feel his shock. I could feel the confusion and the shame rolling off him in waves. He had built his entire identity on being the successful one. He had built my identity on being the failure. And in 90 seconds, this woman in a pantsuit had taken a bulldozer to his entire world. All those years, all those jokes. No direction. Answering. Phones. Good heart. He had been mocking a director of global initiatives. He had been offering a job, answering phones to a woman who managed 10 million in partnerships. His real world of insurance policies. In one small county suddenly looked very, very small. The silence stretched. It was beautiful. It was the sweetest, most validating sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of 20 years of mockery dying. It was the sound of truth, finally arriving. And it wasn't my truth. It was just the truth. It was a truth I had lived every day. It was a truth they had never, ever bothered to ask about. I just stood there, next to the trash cans, holding the dirty plates. And I let the truth fill the air. Dr. Carrington, realizing she had just dropped a bomb, smiled at me. Anyway, she said, her voice gentle again, the board officially approved the promotion and the new salary package. It's all in your email. Congratulations, Julia. You've earned it. Thank you, Elaine, I said. My voice was steady. Thank you for coming. Of course. I'll see you Monday, she said. She gave a polite, general nod to the stunned statues that were my family. A pleasure to meet you all, she said. And with that, she turned, walked back to her sleek black car, and drove away. She left behind a crater, and in the middle of it, there was me. No one moved. Dr. Carrington's black SUV was gone. The only sound was the crunch of gravel as her tires hit the main park road, and then, nothing. Nothing at all. Even the kids who had been screaming and playing tag had stopped. They were standing by the swings, watching the adults. They knew, in the way kids always know, that something big had just happened. The air was thick. It was heavy. It was like the world had run out of sound. I stood there, still holding the stack of dirty paper plates. It was my only anchor. I focused on the smear of mustard on the top plate. I focused on the weight of it in my hands. I listened to my own breathing. In and out. I did not look at them. Not yet. I let the silence do the work. Silence was the real weapon. For 20 years, their lives had been loud. Loud bragging. Loud cars, loud houses, loud vacations. They filled every space with noise, with their accomplishments, with their success. My life to them had been silent. I was the quiet one. The one with no direction, the one who didn't have anything to brag about. But now their noise was gone, and my silence, the silence I had lived in, was now in charge. It had come out of me and filled the entire park, and it was suffocating them. I could feel their eyes on me. It was a new feeling. Before, their looks were quick, dismissive. They were glances of pity. They looked at me, but they never saw me. Now, they were staring. I could feel them trying to do the math. They were trying to connect the two Julias. There was Julia, the one in the old jeans, the one who brought potato salad, the one they laughed at. And there was Julia, the director of global initiatives, the one who handled $10 million, the one who was the right hand of that terrifying, powerful woman. They were trying to make those two people into one, and their brains were breaking. I finally lifted my head. I looked around. It was like a photograph of a disaster. Aunt Lydia's hand was still at her chest. Her mouth was open, her eyes wide with a strange mix of shock and jealousy. She was the family gossiper, and she had missed the biggest story in the family's history. She had been on the wrong side of it. Cousin Mason, the lawyer, was rubbing his chin. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the ground. He was thinking. He was recalculating. He was a man who understood status. He knew in that instant that I had more of it than he did. His junior partnership felt small. Cousin Clara, the CEO, was still holding her phone, but she was looking right at me. Her eyes were sharp. There was no pity. There was no warmth. It was just analysis. She was reassessing a threat. Or an asset. With her, I never knew, my mother. She looked the worst. She was pale. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at her brother-in-law, Uncle Bob. She looked horrified. She looked ashamed. She had been silent for all these years. She had let her daughter be the family joke. She had laughed along, even if it was just a small, polite laugh. And she had just found out that her daughter was the most successful person in the entire family. She had backed the wrong horse, and then there was Uncle Bob. He was the center of the silence. He was still standing where Dr. Carrington had left him, near the grill. The hot dogs he had been cooking were now black. They were smoking. He was just a man. He looked old. His face was a mask of confusion. The bluster was gone. The patriarch was gone. The grill sergeant apron looked ridiculous. His chest wasn't puffed out. He looked deflated. He had built his entire world on a very simple set of rules. He was the top. He was the winner. I was the bottom. I was the loser. And the foundation of his whole life had just been pulled out from under him. He had no idea who he was. If he wasn't the successful one, he had no idea who I was. If I wasn't the failure. The silence stretched. 1 minute. 2 minutes. It was the most honest family gathering we'd ever had. I finally moved. I walked, very slowly, to the trash can. I dumped the paper plates. The sound of them hitting the plastic bag was a cannon shot in the quiet. Everyone flinched. I turned around. I faced them, and I waited. Finally, Uncle Bob cleared his throat. The sound was rough. He looked at me. His eyes were watering. I don't know if it was from the smoke from the grill or from something else. He started. His voice was hoarse. He had to stop and swallow. You never mentioned that, Julia. His voice was small. It was full of accusation. It was full of shame. He was telling me I had cheated. I had kept a secret. I had let him make a fool of himself. I looked at him. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel triumph. I just felt tired and calm. I let his words hang in the air for a second. Then I gave him the only answer that mattered. The answer I had been holding in for 20 years. You never asked, I said. My words landed. You never asked. It wasn't an attack. It was a fact. It was a simple, clean, 5-word summary of our entire relationship. Uncle Bob flinched. He physically recoiled as if I had slapped him. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. He had no response. There was no answer to that. He couldn't say, yes, I did. He couldn't say, that's not true. Because we all knew it was true. The whole family knew. They had all been there. They had all participated. The silence that came after that was different. The first silence was shock. This second silence was shame. And then, the scramble started. It was like a switch had been flipped. The statues came to life, but they weren't the same people. They were all new people, awkward and fumbling, all trying to deal with this new version of me. Aunt Lydia was the first to move. She scurried over to the coolers. Julia, she said. Her voice was high-pitched like a nervous bird. Julia, dear, can I get you a drink? A soda? A water? You must be so parched. She who had laughed at me 10 minutes ago. She who only cared about her vacation home. She was now offering me a bottle of water like a nervous servant. I'm fine, Aunt Lydia, I said quietly. My mother rushed over. She tried to grab my arm. Oh, Julia, honey, well, Director? My goodness, that's just wonderful. We must celebrate. Her eyes were bright with tears. But they weren't tears of joy. They were tears of panic. She was trying to get on my side. She was trying to rebrand herself as the proud mother before the paint was even dry. It's just a job, Mom, I said. No, it's not, she said too loudly. It's amazing. I always knew you were smart. I always told them you were smart. Didn't I, Bob? She looked back at Uncle Bob, looking for support. But Uncle Bob was still staring at his burnt hot dogs. He was in his own private hell. Then, the cousins came. Mason and Clara walked over together. It was a strategic move. They were the success team. They were no longer coming to talk to Cousin Julia. They were coming to talk to a professional equal. Julia, Mason said, his voice low and serious. The joking smirk was gone. That was quite the reveal. I didn't plan it, I said. No, of course not, Clara said. She was looking at me with that analytical stare. But global initiatives. That's impressive. What's your market focus? Are you primarily in infrastructure, or are you in program-based development? It was a test. It was a real job question. For years, I had wanted them to ask me this. I had wanted them to ask me one real question about my life, and now that they were, I realized it didn't matter. It's complicated, I said. Clara's eyes narrowed. She didn't like that answer, but she couldn't challenge me. Well, Mason said, trying to be friendly. He was in damage control mode. I have to say I'm impressed. Really, you kept all that under wraps. I didn't keep it under wraps, Mason, I said, my voice still quiet. I live my life. You all just built a different story. He didn't like that either. He was a lawyer. He knew he'd been found guilty. The tables had turned. And it was awkward. It was clumsy. This wasn't respect. I saw that very clearly. This was fear. They weren't respecting me, Julia. They were respecting the title. They were respecting the money. They were respecting the power they had just seen in Dr. Carrington. They were respecting me because I was, in their language, a winner. It was the same shallow measurement they had always used. It was just that I was on a different side of their ledger now. This wasn't love. It wasn't family. It was a correction in the stock market. My stock had just gone up, and they were all desperately trying to buy in. I looked at all of them, fumbling and smiling, offering me drinks and asking me questions and trying to touch my arm. And I felt for the first time, not anger. Not sadness, I just felt nothing. I was done. The need I'd had for my whole life for them to see me, it was gone, because she had seen me. Dr. Carrington had seen me, and she had shown them. But in the end, I realized, it didn't matter if they saw me or not. I saw me, and I knew it was time to go. I walked over to the picnic table where I had left my things. The party was dead. The laughter was gone. My family was standing in small, awkward groups, whispering. They were all looking at me. I picked up my empty potato salad bowl. It was light. I zipped up my small cooler bag. My mother hurried over, her face a mask of worry. Julia, what are you doing? You're not leaving, are you? Yes, Mom, I said. I didn't look at her. I just focused on zipping the bag. The zipper snagged for a second and I calmly fixed it. But we haven't even cut the cake, she said. Her voice was desperate. If I left now, it was a statement. It was a judgment. She was trying to pretend that everything was normal, that we could all just eat cake and forget the last 20 years. I'm not hungry, Mom, I said. I have to go. Julia, please, she whispered. Don't do this. Your uncle, he's just embarrassed. I finally stopped. I turned and looked at my mother. He's embarrassed? I said. My voice was level. He's embarrassed. For himself. Not for what he did. Not for how he treated me. He's just upset that he got caught. My mother had no answer. Because I was right. I picked up my cooler and the bowl. I started walking toward the parking lot. It was a long walk. It was like walking down a gauntlet. Aunt Lydia and my other aunts were by the drink station. They stopped whispering. They just watched me, their eyes wide. My cousins, Mason and Clara, were standing by their own expensive cars. They were debriefing. They too went silent. They just watched me. I walked past the swings. I walked past the grill, where the smoke was still rising from the black, ruined hot dogs. And I walked past Uncle Bob. He was standing there, his hands in his pockets, his grill sergeant apron stained with grease. He looked like a man who had just lost a fight. He saw me coming. He had to say something. His whole identity, his whole world, depended on him having the last word. "Julia," he said. His voice was soft. All the boom was gone. I stopped. I didn't want to, but I did. I turned and faced him. He was rubbing the back of his neck. He wouldn't look at me. He was looking at the gravel. "Julia," he said again, so softly I could barely hear him. I owe you an apology." There it was. The words, but they were hollow. He was saying it because he had to. He was saying it to make himself feel better. He was trying to fix the situation, to smooth it over, so he could go back to being the patriarch. And the old Julia, the good heart Julia, would have said, "It's okay. Uncle Bob, don't worry about it." She would have made him feel better. But the old Julia was gone. "No," I said. His head snapped up. He looked at me, shocked. "No?" "No," I said again, my voice firm but calm. "You don't owe me an apology. An apology is for when you feel bad. You just feel embarrassed. What you owe me is respect." He stared at me. He had never been spoken to like this. He nodded slowly. He was trying to catch up. "You're right," he said. "You're right. You've earned it, Julia. You've earned it." He still didn't get it. He thought I had earned respect today by having a fancy title and a big salary. He thought respect was a prize you won. A small, sad smile touched my lips. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a smile of release. "No, Uncle Bob," I said, and my voice was so gentle, but it was the final cut. "I didn't earn it today. I always had it." I held his gaze. "You just refused to see it." I let that sit in the air for a second. Then I turned and I walked away. I didn't run. I didn't hurry. I walked in my old jeans to my 10-year-old Honda. I put my cooler and my empty bowl in the back seat. I got in. I put the key in the ignition. The old engine started right up. I looked in my rearview mirror. They were all standing there. My whole family. A small, sad, frozen group of people. They were just watching me, driving away. I drove. I didn't turn on the radio. I just drove, listening to the sound of my tires on the road. I left the park. I turned onto the main road. I drove through my old town. My hands were on the steering wheel. They were perfectly steady. I thought they would be shaking. I thought I would be crying. I thought I would be screaming or yelling, "I won." But I was just calm. It was a quiet triumph. It wasn't a fiery explosion. It was the quiet, cool feeling of a fever finally breaking. For years, I had dreamed of that moment. In my dreams, I was always loud. I would stand up and yell at them. I would have a list, a resume of all my accomplishments. I would throw my success in their faces. But the reality was so much quieter and so much more powerful. I didn't have to say a thing. The truth just arrived. I drove past my old high school. I drove past the movie theater, and I thought about my car. This old Honda. To my family, this car was proof of my failure. It was old. It was cheap. It was not a BMW, but this car was mine. It was paid for. It had never let me down. It had taken me to work every single day. It had taken me to the airport for my flights to South America. This car had been with me while I was earning my success. My family. They had it all backward. They thought success was the result. The new car. The big house. The title. They didn't understand that success was the process. It was the 60-hour weeks. It was the failed grant proposals. It was the budgets that didn't balance. It was the nights I spent on the phone with a team in a different time zone. It was the hard work, the quiet work, the work no one saw. They had spent all those years laughing at my hobby, and I had spent all those years building an empire. I smiled at the irony. They measured worth in luxury and in noise. Today they learned that real power doesn't have to be loud. Real value doesn't need a designer label. They thought I was weak because I was silent, but my silence wasn't weakness. It was just patience. It was focus. It was a disguise. I was a director long before Dr. Carrington gave me the title. I was successful long before my salary matched it. The title, the money, the promotion, that wasn't the win. The win was that feeling. The feeling of driving away. The win was knowing that I would go back to my life, a life I loved, a life filled with purpose, and they would go back to their lives, which were now just a little bit smaller, a little bit paler, I did feel a little sad. I was sad because I knew in that moment that they didn't love me. They didn't. They respected the director. They were impressed by the money. They were afraid of Dr. Carrington. If I lost my job tomorrow, they would go right back to the pitying smiles. They would go right back to good heart, no direction. Their respect was conditional. It was transactional. And that was the real family drama. That was the real neglect. It wasn't that they mocked me for being a failure. It was that they were only capable of loving me as a success. I pulled into the driveway of my small, simple apartment. I turned off the car. The silence in my car was my own. It was peaceful. I had won. I had won my freedom. I would never again sit at a family dinner and wait for the punchline. I would never again dread a reunion. I was no longer their entertainment. I was no longer their cautionary tale. I was just Julia. And for the first time in my whole life, that was enough. Weeks later, my phone rang. The caller ID said, Morales Insurance Group. I smiled. I picked up. Julia Morales. Julia! Hi, it's Uncle Bob. His voice was different. The boom was gone. It was the voice of a salesman. It was nervous. Hi, Uncle Bob, I said. So, Julia, I was thinking, I was really impressed with your organization. Horizon Impact. Really great stuff you're doing. Really great. It is, I said. Yeah, well, our company, Morales Insurance. We've been looking to do more community partnership. Give back. And I was thinking, maybe we could partner with Horizon Impact for a local project. We could sponsor something. It would be great PR. Great for the community. I listened. I let him finish. Send the proposal, I said. What? Send me the proposal. Email it to my office. I'll review it. There was a long pause. I could hear him breathing. You'll review it? Yes, I said. I'm the one who approves community contracts now. The silence on the line was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't loud. It's professional. It's calm. It's when the same people who mocked you end up needing your approval.